Hi, welcome to Thank You Half Hour. My name is Tom Christopher Warren. I'm your host, and today's guest I can't be more excited about. Made her Broadway debut at 12. Wrap your head around that. Made her Broadway debut at 12 years old. Went on to appear in 7 more Broadway shows. The film version of Hairspray, the film of Hail Caesar. Led the national tour of Wicked across the country as Glinda. And has worked at this is where I really geek out, some of the most extraordinary regional theaters in the country. Paper Mill, Goodspeed, Barrington, Sacramento Music Circus, Arena Stage, the Muni. These incredible regional theaters around the country, and is now a Webby-nominated host, producer, and writer. Please welcome my next guest, Haley Podschun. Haley, thank you for joining me.
Thank you. You know my resume better than me. That's so sweet.
I get that a lot. I read up on everybody, and my mind is just blown at the breadth of work. And we share a mutual friend, Eric Huffman, who said you're just, I forget the word he used for dizzying. Her resume is dizzying. And this is one of my questions, but I'm just going to bring it up now. Eric quotes as saying, where is it? She's a Renaissance woman in the industry. So I'm thrilled to have a chance to talk with you. How are you?
I'm great. It's a little cold here in New York today, so I'm not thrilled about that, but the sun is shining, which, lightens my mood, and I'm great.
Are your moods regulated by the sunshine?
Yes, I'm a summer baby. Yeah. I was born in June. So I'm also like a girl who lives for dresses. So once it's dress season, I fully come into myself and I'm my most happy.
I love it. Okay, so I have to start with, I mean, it seems like the obvious thing to me, maybe not to everybody, but Broadway at 12. Where are you from originally?
Originally from Kansas.
Yeah.
I started working professionally when I was 10 years old in Kansas City. And then just kind of through word of mouth of my dance studio and friends that were involved, of course, our spring breaks, some of them were spent in New York.
Yep.
And found out that the Broadway company of The Sound of Music was having auditions for the tour that they were going to be launching. And so, this was like right when the internet was still very new, but no one really knew how to use it. And so my mom, this is how I always tell it, but I don't know if it's 100% right. My mom called Binder Casting and they were like, okay, bring her in. It doesn't happen like that. So I went in, I auditioned, and then they were like, great, can you come back next weekend? And of course we lived in Kansas. So we flew back.
Yeah.
Had my audition, and it was for the full team behind the table, tons of kids and parents in the hallways of Uptown Ripley Greer.
Yeah.
And Jack Bowden of Binder Casting came out and drug my parents around the corner, and he didn't let me hear, but he was like, we're actually considering her for the Broadway company. Can you take her to the theater? We need to measure her because, the Von Trapps are very specific with the height,
Sure.
But also this is really when I learned about the show business is a business, and they don't want to spend money to make new costumes, so they had to make sure that I would fit the costumes. Right. So we went to the theater, the Martin Beck at the time, which is now the Al Hirschfeld, and they measured me up against the proscenium, and they said, you're 1/4 of an inch too tall. We love you, but it's because they have to allow kids growth room as well. And but then they called a couple days later and they were like, nope, we love you. We want you. We'll make it work. So you start rehearsals on Tuesday. And so
Gave
my
you a
mom
pack
and
of cigarettes to stunt your growth.
Exactly.
Figure it out. Yeah.
My mom and I moved here. My dad would visit every 2 weekends. And it was the greatest time. The show, unfortunately, had been running by a year and a half by the time I joined. And then it closed 4 months later. But I did get to go on. I was a standby for Luisa and Brigida. And it was the most magical and kind of heartbreaking time because I really did see that it was a business. And for a 12-year-old to realize that was really eye-opening for me. But I'm thankful for it. And it was so special. I loved it.
It's really remarkable because I have a long relationship with The Lion King, and we have kids in the show, and to watch them cycle through and to see some of them stay in theater, right? Or they stay in the arts, and some of them become politicians, and some of them, they branch out as journalists, whatever. But to watch them come into their own, and as you said, realizing at this young age it demystifies theater for them, for good and for bad, and to see them realize that it is a business is heartbreaking and also Beautiful, because they become
Yeah.
one of us very young.
Yeah, and I think that really helped me later as an adult when I maybe wouldn't book a show. I really did learn that sometimes it's really not about your talent. It's,
Yeah.
do you look a certain way? Do you fit the costumes, you know? And that is the business side of it. And I think that that is really important. And I try to kind of say that a lot when I teach, that sometimes it just comes down to that. And you have to know your worth and you have to know that you are wonderful in certain, you know, in all ways, but for certain
Yep.
shows, you're going to be a perfect fit. And for other shows, you're just not. And just to, I guess, love the special qualities of yourself, and to be your biggest advocate. And so I learned that at 12.
It's wild walking that tightrope of putting your heart and soul and everything that is a part of you cellularly into the work, but also being able to remove that enough to be able to function and wake up after hearing no, for most of us, many more times than we hear yes, right? And you put everything personal into it and not take it personally. That's a thin line to walk.
Yeah. And I feel like that has helped me have my own identity instead
Hmm.
of like I am a Broadway performer. It's like, well, I'm Haley and I also perform on Broadway, you know, and that I love doing that, but that's not who I am. And I think especially during pandemic, I call it
Yes,
pandy,
Pandy.
you know, I was fine emotionally because it wasn't something of like I was searching for my identity. I was like, well, I already know who I am. And that's just my job and my job will come back and it's okay. So I'm very grateful for that.
That's extraordinary. So, this Renaissance woman of the industry, right? Is are all of these have all of these facets been a part of Haley, or have you found yourself redefining yourself throughout the years through necessity, or do both exist?
Oh gosh, I think both. I really do credit a lot of it to where Eric and I grew up dancing at the Miller Marley School of Dance and Voice in
Yes.
Overland Park, Kansas. They really trained us to be so well-rounded, and you kind of have to be able to do everything. You know, not just dance and sing, but like ballet, tap, jazz, you know. One day you're doing this number with this performing troupe and you're standing on this side of the stage, and then the next time you perform, you're doing this part of the number. Like you just have to be able to adapt really well. And I kind of believe that like that early training allowed me to just be this chameleon that can go from a Hairspray to a Sunday in the Park with George to a Wicked, you know, where there's no dancing to
Right.
anything goes where I'm tap dancing on stage, you know. So it's just kind of being able to bop around and um, I also sit back and learn and watch a lot of people. That's how I learn is just sitting back and watching other people. So I think that helped.
Same. It's interesting. I just had a conversation with Gray Hansen, and he referenced his dance studio because he had been dancing since age 4. And I clocked. I went to the Mickey Rooney's School of, I call it tap jazz and fire
Yes.
baton, but it wasn't Mickey Rooney's Talent Town. But we have these experiences as little kids in these studios, often dance studios, right? It's often rooted in dance, but expanded to other things. And those, if we're open to them, those lessons serve us forever moving forward. Like, do you recall at the studio in Kansas who were your mentors? Who had the path that you were like, yep, I want to emulate that?
Oh, yeah, there were always like a couple of the older girls where at my studio there were a lot of different dance like companies. We had the
Mm.
entertainers, which were the big kids, and then we had the mini tainers, which were the little kids. And then the studio grew and like we had a ballet company, which I was
Wow.
then later a part of. And but I first started as a mini tainer and you know, to be able to grow up and be like, oh my gosh, I'm dancing with, you know, XYZ girl. And now I get to sing their parts and, you know, watching them throughout their high school shows. We had incredible theater programs in our communities, but also in our schools, and watching them in their high school productions and the community productions of how good they were. And some of them I performed with here in New York. We all like there's been something said about Miller Marley specifically. They're like, there's something in the water there that people really do a wild thing and they all come to New York and they're really good. So yeah, there were definitely some people, and some of my teachers are still teaching at the studio today. It's pretty incredible.
Do you find yourself as a teacher I certainly the answer is probably going to be yes, but how do you find yourself informed by the teachers that you were fortunate enough to have in your work as a teacher?
Oh God, that's such a good question. I would say both. Of course, like things have changed with just how we interact with each other as humans.
Hmm.
So I think, and then you learn of like, oh, maybe in the past, like, and not for my teachers, but maybe even just like a rehearsal experience
Mm,
of like, oh, I wish that this had maybe gone this way, or I'd learned something this way. But yeah, I think I am probably inspired, of course, by the people that I've, learned from, but some of it is my own experience too. So I guess
yeah.
I'd say both.
Yeah, I had a director. There's a community theater in Edison, New Jersey, plays in the park that I grew up, and performing in. And back then, it was federally funded and it free to an audience sitting outside. So they'd have crowds of 5,000 people,
Oh,
and
wow.
with federal money, with a board of freeholders that governed everything. So it was very union orchestra, but community theater, and the age was typically like college and up. Now it's skewed lower, but I would be pushing the scenery at 15, 16, watching college kids and equity guest artists in this remarkable sort of professional setting. And there was a director who would whisper to actors in the room when he would have an idea for them. And you'd watch him whisper something and go, "Oh, something really cool is going to come out of this." Usually something funny, because he was a brilliant
Yeah.
comedic director, is. And it taught me be present in the room, be literally in the room, because if you weren't, you didn't get your little feature or whatever. They whatever the play needed at that moment in the rehearsal process was culled from whoever was in front of the team. So I learned be there, and then just cultivating the kernel of a joke through that secret, that whisper, and then we get to watch it flourish. It's things like that that I remember from my teenage years that I think silently inform how I work now as a director,
Yes,
teacher, actor. How lucky were we, right, to have those
I know.
experiences?
I know. And I had so much experience growing up in Kansas. I mean, it's truly insane how lucky I was to have so many opportunities professionally, community, at my school. Um, I look at a lot of these kids where I go do a lot of master classes around the country, but it's obviously very close to New York, like in the tri-state area.
Sure.
And um, it's so inspiring to see these kids do their high school musicals. But then I look back and, not in a negative way of what these kids have, but I'm like, holy moly, we had it really good. Like we had the sets at our school shows. Granted, my mom painted them, who's like the most talented artist you'll ever meet, but like they were insane. Like we did Charlie and the Chocolate Factory in the seventh grade, and we had a full out chocolate river
Oh my
that
God.
went through the set. Oh yeah, seventh grade. You
What?
know, changing sets. I mean, it was wild. And then our costumes were incredible. And this was just at school,
That's
let alone our professional and community theater that happened year round. I think on average, I probably did 4 shows a year growing up.
same.
Nuts. On top
Nuts.
of that, with like dance, and I don't know how I slept or let alone got through
Yeah,
school.
I don't know how I graduated. I should never have graduated high school. Who I think the principal and vice principal somehow like saw me in shows and were like silently erasing absences, because I can barely I speak one language and I barely speak it. I should never have graduated. But I,
Same.
can sing. Is Eric Huffman the most talented human being you've ever met? I mean, this is our mutual friend Eric. He's ridiculous.
I know, and he does it all. He does the piano, and he's in the pit and on the
And then on the
stage.
stage, and he taps, and he's a fantastic storyteller. Just
It's the Miller Marley. I'm telling you, we have to be able to do it all.
That's incredible. So, okay, talk to me about Caesar and Hairspray, the film, because I'm curious. I have I have very, very minimal experience in film and not musical film. So, how did the form translate for you? You'd already done a billion Broadway shows, toured nationally in musicals. Now you're in front of a camera. Had you already done camera work before these two? Had you done any of the had the host experience?
So for Hairspray, I had done like an episode. I did oh my gosh, I forgot about this. I did a reenactment of unfortunately like a murder in this episode of Psychic Detectives.
Oh my God.
And I don't like anything scary. So this was like
Same.
really traumatic for me, but we filmed I'm going like way off, but we filmed in the house where it happened. Never
I
want
don't
to do
know.
that
Yeah, no.
again. Anyway, so that was kind of my only real like film experience, TV by that time. Um, but I did the national tour of Hairspray, which would have been during my sophomore year of college. So I did that for a year
Wow.
and like right into the film. I auditioned for the film while I was still on tour, and I was actually playing Penny on the tour in LA when I auditioned. Adam Shankman and his team came to the show that night after the audition during the day. And then I got a call the next morning saying, we want you to for the movie.
Insane.
And we started rehearsals in Toronto, I think a week after the film, or sorry, a week after the tour closed.
Oh,
And then I got a call from casting from the Broadway company on my first day on location for the film saying, we want you to join the Broadway company. So I did a sandwich,
yeah.
of the stage version with the film in between nonstop for like 3 years. I was ponying and smiling like crazy. Um,
Unbelievable.
it was really wild. And there were only two of us at the time when the film happened that we had done the show
I was
before.
going to ask. Okay.
Me and my friend Jesse, he played IQ. We had both done the tour together, and we were the only two people that had done the show before. And it was wild because it was so in my body, the choreography, the songs, and I always say on stage, we ponied with our arms side to side, like big, strong arms. But in the movie, we ponied with them flat in front of us. And so that was like very it took me a long time for my body to switch from one back to the other
Yeah.
while singing the same songs. Um, Costumes were more realistic in the film because it was just more of a real life
Yeah.
vision versus the stage version. I had 3-pound wigs that looked like an ice cream cone. So
John
that
Jordan
was
is an old friend. Was he doing wigs when you were on Broadway with it?
yes, I think so. I
I
think.
can see those wigs in my memory. They're just
Oh my God. I'll never
massive.
forget. So heavy, but so fun. Obviously, film, when you finish a number, there's no applause. So
Mm,
that was different for me
yeah.
because, we finished the number and we're smiling and there's nothing. And so then all of us turn to each other and we're like, were we good? We don't know. But it's really fun that, when I do these master classes and I say I was in the Hairspray movie, like it's still a big thing with students and kids these days.
Yeah.
And so it's their thing that they kind of freak out over, which is so special. It's just fun that like I get to go back and watch that part of my life forever. And that's, I think, what makes film so special. With theater, you kind of have to have internal memories of it and
Yeah.
photos. You don't get to, go back and watch it with your family, but it was really fun. It was really great.
Just extraordinary. Was Scott Davidson in the show with you, either on the road or in New York?
Yes, we toured together.
Yeah. His wife, Elise. I've known Scott for 30 years. I'm 55, so I've known Elise for 40. She's my best friend
Yeah.
growing up. And yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh my
So I
gosh,
got to
so
see him play Edna. Yeah,
so great.
it's just so great to see, particularly early in your career, to see pals have their moment, their breakout moment. Where I remember seeing, did you ever do Sound of Music with Rebecca Luker? Or I guess
No,
she'd left.
but I was with Laura.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rebecca had left by that time, and so Laura was my Maria.
I got to see a buddy of mine cover opposite Rebecca in Showboat, and the night he went on for the first time, and I remember sitting there with my first time in a house seat in a Broadway theater and seeing him kiss Rebecca Luker. I was like, I can't wrap my head around the fact that you're kissing Lily from Secret Garden, who I saw in 10th grade. Like,
Oh my God,
and then I
right?
later did a show with her. The whole thing is just this nonlinear, bizarre roller coaster ride, this carnival experience that you've had since 11 years old. That's
Yeah,
remarkable.
it's pretty nuts. I mean, speaking of that, my boyfriend and I met a year ago doing a Disney workshop together, but I did not know this until we chatted our first day. We had worked together 10 years ago on Chaplin on Broadway. And I didn't know this because he came in as a rehearsal pianist at like our last week of rehearsal in the
Oh my God.
studio, which is when people are the
Yeah.
craziest. and our band was in the basement. I never saw them. And he was like, I've had a crush on you for 10 years. So like it's just wild that like
Oh,
it really does cycle through and you meet the people and it's all a huge puzzle piece that forms together by the end.
it's hard to explain to muggles the intimacy that is generated in our industry and the immediacy. You know, you form these bonds immediately, and you may or may not see that person again for another decade, but you pick up where you left off. Typically,
Yeah.
you know, it's just part of the magic of what we do, I guess.
Yeah, it's really special and very one of a kind for
Yeah.
sure. And thank you for using the term muggles. That's the only way we describe normal people.
I mean, right? Like there's us and then there's muggles.
Yeah, we're the circus freaks, I always say.
Completely, completely. So what do you love about teaching master classes?
I think I just love empowering the kids,
Mm,
and especially for how our business has morphed, that like you really do need to love yourself and be your biggest advocate, but also just to really be inspired. This last semester, I was teaching at a school called IAMT in here in New York, and goodness gracious, these kids are really talented,
yeah.
and I'm like, great, it's gonna be in good hands. I think we're good, but it's just exciting to see their excitement and to empower them to like love themselves and to be their number one cheerleader.
Yeah. I mean, they have access to it now that, I didn't have with Smash and with Glee and with High School Musical and with this resurgence of movie musicals. I mean, I didn't really have that growing up, but they have
Same.
access to everything. So they understand the vocabulary of what we do in a way that I really didn't know. I think it was,
Yeah. I mean, YouTube alone is
oh,
like has changed their lives. But I remember I went to school for 1 year. I went to college for 1 year. And I remember showing up to school and everyone, this is so embarrassing because I worked with Jason Robert Brown, but I showed up to school and everyone's obsessed with Jason
yeah,
and his music. And I was like, I don't know who this is. Like, because I'm like a Rodgers and Hammerstein girl. So
got
I
it.
was like, I don't know who this is. But nowadays, like I would have known every single song if I had YouTube at that time or Spotify, like they know everything. And it's truly
It's
insane.
wild. Yeah. Jason, I was working at a piano bar that I don't know that piano bars so much exist anymore, but called 88's down in the village when I was early 20s, 22, 23. And so this would have been many, many years ago. And Jason Robert Brown would show up underage. So we wouldn't let him hang out, but he would want to play a tune or two. And so he would play, he was 20, I guess, Stars and Moon and Not Afraid of Anything. And then we'd say, okay, now you've got to go because you're not of age.
Of course.
And thinking to myself, this came out of the brain of a 20-year-old. And then, of course, time
It's
told the
truly
story of
that.
Jason Robert Brown. Yeah. Remarkable.
Yeah.
Absolutely remarkable. What do you have coming up that you're excited about? Are you traveling for the summer? Are you taking advantage
Oh
of the
gosh.
great things the city has to offer?
I'm waiting to hear on one job. I have another one that's coming up in September, which I'm like the most excited about, but I don't know if I'm allowed to say, and I hate
Fair.
being that person.
No, it's
Um,
exciting.
so I guess just like stay tuned. But
We'll have you back on when you're publicizing it, when you're plugging it.
yeah, it's a very short little contract, but it's a big dream role of mine. And so like the 10-year-old in me is so excited. And I'm just really looking forward to it. There's some of those jobs where sometimes you take the jobs because you're like, I need the insurance weeks, and other jobs you're like, I don't care what I get paid. I can't wait to do this part. And that's
Yeah.
this one for me. So I'm really
Oh,
excited and I get to be with a friend who's directing it.
oh.
But other than that, I'm doing a lot of hosting these days for corporate companies, which I'm
Yes.
loving. And I'm really trying to lean into that world. I've been performing now for what feels like 500 years, and I'm tired. And the younger kids, they've got it, so I'll
Yeah.
let them do it. And I'm loving coming into these corporate companies and kind of doing what I'm doing with my students,
Yeah.
inspiring them and like emceeing events basically and bringing my energy and inspiring them to have a great day. And I'm just loving it.
That is fantastic. Are you working through a booking agent for these gigs, or how are you doing that?
One of these I found through LinkedIn, believe it or not. It's very muggly.
Yeah.
Muggles love LinkedIn. I'm like, I don't get it, but they love it. So, and then I'm also a guest host on QVC. So I
Yeah.
represent an Italian leather bag company called Tarita, and they just launched earlier in this month, April or late March. And so I'm the person where I go on the air and I talk about Tarita and their beautiful handmade leather bags. And, I don't have to lie about anything because
Yeah.
I use one every day and I love it so much. And so I just get to go talk about something that I love. It's awesome.
And be you and share your you-ness. Yeah, that's very cool. As cool as it is to play a character, for someone who is comfortable being themselves and to get paid doing it, come on.
Dreams.
Well, I
I
can't
just
wait to.
miss the costume aspect of it for Broadway. You get to wear these like beautiful couture costumes that are made for
Come
you. And
on.
let's be real, I really miss that.
Those Glinda dresses alone, I mean,
Dreams come true for me.
Susan Hilferty, right, did the costumes for that. And we did a
Yes.
show together at the Guthrie, and I was like, oh, all these gorgeous guys. And I'm in purple, and they were fabulous, but purple coveralls because I played a socialist and a PCAP. And I was like, everybody looks so gorgeous. And I look right, but
Correct. At least it was purple. You had a good color.
I did have a good color. Yeah. Yeah. Babes in Arms, the most money the Guthrie has ever spent and the most money they've ever lost.
Oh no.
But a great time. A great time. Well, Haley, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. The show's called Thank You Half Hour, so I do have to wrap it up around the 30-minute mark. But I want to get you back on here. There's so much more to talk about. I want to talk more about QVC and about this gig at the end of the summer. I hope it's wonderful. And looking forward to postmorteming about that.
Yes, anytime. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
All right, half hour.
Thank you, Half Hour.
Boxland Media. Think big.